this one will feature Randy Mucha of Firefly Legal. Randy, you got your webcam going, and I just unmuted you, so say hi to us, make sure that we can hear you.
Hi, Trent. How's this sounding?
You sound great. You sound great. So just so everyone knows, this session is going to be a little bit more interview style. So I will be asking Randy questions, and you can go ahead as the audience and feel free to ask questions along the way as well in this particular session. But I will give a little background and intro for Randy. Randy is the manager of client services and civil process and vendor relations at Firefly Legal. That's a mouthful, but I think I got that right. Among other things, that means he recruits and manages their nationwide network of process serving vendors. As I said before, this session will be interview style, and he and I will talk through some of the responsibilities that he has there at Firefly in his position. Feel free to ask questions along the way. Randy is joining us from Firefly headquarters in Mucha, Illinois. And Randy, why don't you start us off by giving us a little background on how you ended up at your role at Firefly?
Well, thanks, Trent. First off, thanks a lot for inviting me to participate in ServeCon 2015.
Absolutely.
Like you said, I'm in Mucha, Illinois. We're just outside of Chicago. That's our corporate headquarters. Firefly actually has 13 staffed offices across the country, and just about 100 of our own in-house process servers that work out of those 13 offices. Before coming to Firefly, I had a 20-year career in law enforcement, and about half of that was in leadership or management roles. I got a master's degree in organizational leadership, and in 2007, after my 20 years, I started serving process full-time. I served over 10,000 papers in about a 5-year period, and I don't need to tell you guys that it's fun and it's challenging work. I really liked it. I prided myself on being organized, detailed, thorough, and in a majority of cases, I was actually able to get the signature of the person that I served on my field sheet. So in all that time, I only had 3 cases ever contested, and I was able to prevail at all 3 hearings in court. The real irony, I guess, is, or maybe not if you're an attorney, for 2 out of those 3, I had the defendant's signature on my field sheet, so I think the attorney just wanted to see if I'd show up in court. I'm also treasurer of the Illinois Association of Professional Process Servers, and if anybody out there is from Illinois, it's a great group to join. Look up ILAPS. Our spring conference is coming up in a couple of months at Harrah's Hotel and Casino in Joliet. Anyway, in 2012, I was invited to come off the street, and I took on the role of managing our process servers here at Firefly, and that includes our network of vendors that handle our services where we don't have physical offices.
Gotcha. So, Randy, before we get a little bit deeper into the vendor management conversation, just tell us a little bit more about Firefly. I mean, your role is very much associated with managing the vendors or the affiliates, if you will. Do you consider Firefly a forwarding company, or is that just the nature of having a business with a lot of high volume clients?
I'm glad you kind of asked that. A lot of people equate Firefly among other larger national companies termed forwarders or forwarding companies. And Firefly, in a nutshell, I guess, yes, we forward papers, but that's not why we're in business. We're actually a mid-sized, family-owned and managed legal support firm, and we've been in business since '96. The offices we do have were all strategically placed to serve our existing clients. And in a lot of cases, we do a lot more for our clients than just serve their summons and complaints. For instance, we've got some clients that we handle an entire file from the time the attorney drafts a complaint all the way until he walks into the courtroom. We've got paralegals on staff with us. Actually, our Florida offices are managed by a paralegal. Of course, the process serving piece is a really important part of the entire process, and we recognize that, without the feet on the ground of those process serving companies, vendors, individuals, our business would come to a halt. I mean, that's really one of the more vital cogs in the wheel that keeps our work flowing. So, we pride ourselves on working with the best, and we treat them well. A lot of our servers in-house have been with us for 5 to 10 or more years. Actually, our company vice president started here as a court filer and then a process server, did almost every other function in our company. And in a pinch, he and even other members of management, including the owner himself, will still go out, pitch in, serve a paper, maybe even do some court filing. That includes myself as well, and frankly, it's nice to get out of the office and stay in touch with the street. Even if I can run a paper on a lunch and get out of here for more than half an hour and go get a service done and make a client happy with a rush, I'm glad to do it. I love doing it. Anyway, back to vendors. Because we do need to serve our clients' defendants wherever they may be located, and we can't have an office in every city and state, we do find ourselves partnering with vendors to serve our work for us across the country. So I guess in that aspect, yeah, we forward work. I guess the most common scenario that leads to that is Firefly will attempt to serve a defendant locally, with one of our in-house servers, and find that the property's vacant, they've moved, and then whether it's via skip tracing or information gathered by our servers out in the field, we learn that the defendant now needs to be served in a location where we don't have a physical office. So this is where our vendors do play a vital role in accomplishing what our clients need from us. Now currently, Firefly has about 2,000 vendors in our database that we have used and we keep at the ready when needed. But to kind of bring that down more to real life, I pulled up our stats, and in the past 12 months, we've used just under 500 of those vendors. Now, of course, some of those we use quite regularly, and those are mostly in major cities. And then we got vendors in the more rural areas that may only see 1 or 2 services from us in a year. We have to keep in mind, too, that whether forwarding 1 paper in a year or dozens in a week, both of those vendors that we send to are equally important to us and to our success and to making our client happy.
So you mentioned you have a database that you obviously can actively peruse internally there. What other types of tools do you utilize for recruiting and vendor management? Where do you start? How do you go about finding a new vendor? What are some of the tools that maybe a company who's looking to get into more forwarding work can utilize to find quality affiliates?
My recommendation to anybody, whether it's a one-person process server that can possibly get into forwarding, or a mid-sized company, or even a large company, is the same for everybody. It's the tools that are my go-to places. It's what I use to build that database of the 2,000 I mentioned, and that was built slowly over the years, that were sourced using these tools. But obviously in-house I'll go to that database first, but when I can't find somebody there, the tools I use, and this is roughly in the order I use them, is I go to the ServeNow and the NAPS directories and the state association websites. And I like to look there first because membership in professional organizations is a pretty good indicator to me that that member treats his business as a profession. It's not just a job. He's not a fly-by-night. He's got an established presence. And he's put himself out there. He's made himself available. His information is there. I can check him out. And then beyond those, other sources include LinkedIn and, of course, Google. LinkedIn can be hit and miss. I try it when those other directories don't turn up someone close enough to where I need a vendor, but I've also had some good luck there. For instance, a while back I did need a new vendor and went on LinkedIn, simply punched in the state and the words process server in that search bar at the top, and one of the first profiles it hit on was just the LinkedIn profile of a government employee that happened to serve process for his local court system, and that was mentioned in his profile, so it hit. So it didn't appear he was actively looking for work, but it was a lead. So I sent him an inquiry and I asked if he knew anyone interested in handling some of our work in his area. And long story short, he was interested. We ended up using him very successfully, and we still use him to this day. For Google and the other search engines, just punch in process server along with the city and state and see who pops up. Check them out, see if they have a website, or give them a call. Now, what I'd like to note is when you punch process server in for your home city and state, if you don't see yourself as one of those first couple of names that appears in that search, it might be time to work on your web presence and search engine optimization, or SEO as I think they call it. But that's kind of a topic for another presenter.
Yeah. That's very important, Randy, and I think, I don't know if you were on earlier, but that's something that Jeff had talked about, Jeff Karakin. He said, basically in fewer words, you need to have a website, you need to have strong branding, you need to be found on Google and the other search engines, and obviously you're not here to talk about that. But from a perspective of someone who is potentially hiring a vendor, a process serving vendor, what stands out to you when you see their listing on a directory or when you go to their website? From your perspective, do you have any tips or suggestions to make their business look more attractive to a company like a Firefly?
Absolutely. And normally, I mean, the first step, I think, for most of us these days, whether you're doing some online shopping or you're looking for a process server, is that web presence. I'm gonna, if I find them in one of the directories, I'm gonna click on that website link. So a strong professional web presence is extremely important. I know more and more clients are using the web to search for servers, and to find you need to be on the web. A lot of the paralegals and law clerks who are charged with locating servers for their firms simply do just Google server and a city. And that's how a lot of our newer clients do find us as well. That doesn't guarantee a new major firm with regular work, but I mean, that's certainly another service that you can get done and get your name out there. And a website is your online storefront. It conveys who you are and what you offer to the world. So with a website, you're no longer limited to a customer base that's just close to your office, which is what the old-fashioned yellow pages used to do. So let's say your place of business is on the East Coast. A potential new client needs process serving done in your city, but they may be on the West Coast. They're going to punch in your city and process server. So, a well-designed website makes your company, and again, no matter how big or how small, look professional. At the same time, a poorly designed site can make you look unprofessional, and I think we've all clicked on those too, and kind of come away with the opinion that this is old, it's not updated. It doesn't leave a good taste or first impression. So, I mean, my only real recommendation is whoever designs your site, make sure that when customers visit that site, they can easily find the information they want, and that's going to lead them to, take the next step, which is going to be to call you or to email you, and that's what's going to put those new documents in your hands.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely what it's all about, is giving people the ability to contact you, have a nice, clean, professional, easy to navigate web presence. And for most process servers, especially if you're looking for a lot of that affiliate work, that's really all you need, something just simple and clean. So once you locate them and you vet them online, what are you looking for in a partner? How much does experience come into play? Does professionalism sort of well, I guess I'll let you answer that part first. What are you looking for when it comes to experience?
Well, in a nutshell, I'm always looking for the more experienced servers if I can get them. And again, professional memberships are a great indicator of that. What I don't want to find myself doing is finding someone with minimal experience who's a long distance away, because I've got a training curve and a lot of additional work to put in there to really help somebody else build their business. When what I'm really looking for is somebody that can hit the ground running. So I'm looking for that experience, and again, brings me back to those organizations. And hopefully, with experience does come professionalism. So I also like to look and see how long somebody's been in business. I know the directories often mention that, state associations mention that. And unfortunately, like any profession, even among the experienced, there are a few bad apples out there, but obviously we don't let them spoil the bunch. And we monitor, any of our brand new vendors' work pretty closely at first until we're satisfied that all our expectations are being met. In fact, we've got a server compliance team, and their whole function is to audit every job once completed before anything then is returned to our client. So say an unscrupulous server fakes attempts or a notary is forged, first off, we catch it before it goes to a client, and next, it's simply time to part company. Now, I give those two examples because I encountered both of those recently, and that was thankfully due to our compliance team, and nothing made it to a client. In the case of the forged notary, it was bad enough that normally it's not my business, not my problem. I don't take the time, but I mean, this guy was out there, and it was bad enough. I was actually compelled to file a complaint with his state, and I did get a follow-up call from them. Didn't tell me what they did, but they did take action. Now, on our end, luckily, roughly 96% on average of closed jobs pass our audit team, no questions asked, ready to go to the client. Everything looks great. And the rest generally are simple little things, a missing piece of a physical description, a missing date, maybe some illegible handwriting. So that gets caught, it gets kicked back to a vendor and gets corrected, but hopefully not slowing down the work, and keeps the client happy. They never know there was a mistake and that we caught it in best case scenario. So again, I mean, I think the key to a really solid partnership is that the relationship not be one-sided, but that it need to be mutually beneficial. The end goal is pleasing the client. A happy client sends more work, right? And that's more work for you and more work for your vendor partners.
We touched a little bit on professionalism, and how much do first impressions, that first phone call, that first interaction that you have with a potential vendor come into play?
I think everybody listening, everybody in this business and any other probably realizes that first impressions mean a great deal. I, like probably the rest of the presenters today, we're worried about what kind of first impression am I going to make to, everybody listening, and I hope I'm doing okay. But after I locate someone who looks to be a viable candidate and I want to make contact, it's time to speak in person. And I prefer the phone to email in the beginning because I can get a much better read on who I'm speaking with. As you guys know, email lacks tone, it lacks inflection. It can be taken right or it can be taken wrong. And again, I'll pick up that phone. And I think we're moving to a world where, when it comes to interviews, we've done some, hiring interviews via WebExes like this, and there'll be a time in the not too distant future where, a potential vendor that might have this capability, we can chat just the way we're doing now. But, right now, on that phone, frankly, I want to be wowed. I want to be impressed. I want to hear a go-getter attitude. I want to hear a willingness, to get our job done, to meet our client expectations, a desire to provide us with a work product that the vendor's proud of. Excuse me. I kind of shy away from or don't like to hear, maybes or sense tentativeness. And again, back to associations, if the person I'm talking to is a member of an association, this is a great time for them to mention that, talk about what they do outside of just process serving to keep the profession going and bolster their standing in our community. It's where a prospective new vendor really must let their experience and their professionalism shine through to me. I love it when they're able to share some stories with me, some of the ways that they, get service accomplished, some of the ways that they've been creative. And, we all like to talk about our experiences, and this is a chance for them to share some good war stories with me and sell themselves at the same time. And I don't know how much time we'll have, but, I'm all for sharing some war stories, so, we'll see maybe at the end.
Yeah, we'll check in on that. We definitely have some time left. Let's get into, I guess, a little bit of the nitty-gritty of the agreements. Do you have contracts that you engage in with your vendors?
Well, I don't like to call them contracts, only because they're not really a hard and fast, locking anybody into anything. But we do ask our vendors to understand and sign a couple of documents. And the first is, it's simple and it's titled Notice of Vendor Expectations. And basically, it simply asks that due to the scrutiny of this industry by financial institutions, government agencies, the big banks, that our vendors do have a sufficient internal procedure and control in place to ensure the integrity of our work that they're doing for us. And most of the time they do, because they need it for the other work they're doing anyway. So we really don't request anything that a professional server doesn't already do, but it does serve as documentation should we ever get audited at our end. And it serves as a reminder to vendors that we do expect them to conduct their business ethically and within the law. Now we have another one. It's a little bit longer, and again it's an agreement more than a contract, and it's titled Confidentiality and Compliance Agreement. And that one addresses the importance of confidentiality and reminds vendors of the types of information that we consider confidential. Again, no surprise to a professional, I don't think, but we remind our vendors that personally identifiable information, or PII as we call it, is very important, and the importance of not sharing it. We don't send a whole lot out with PII on it unless we need to. Most of it's going to be redacted before our clients even send it to us, but we even audit our stuff before it goes out the door. So, we just like to make sure that they understand what it is and acknowledge that they'll exercise their due diligence in handling our papers, as well as it does talk about a little, if the vendor is a one person, he's kind of not bound by this anyway, because we're hiring him. He's up and running. But let's say I'm looking to send some work to a firm with several employees. We do include a line in that confidentiality and compliance agreement that just asks that any vendors also conduct pre-employment background checks on whoever they hire. Now again, I think it's a pretty valid assumption that anybody out there in the business of hiring processors to serve process for them is background checking their employees. But we need to just make sure that we're stating it, that we have it in writing, that any vendor agency we're going to use has implemented appropriate checks to ensure that their employees remain licensed or at least authorized to perform service of process by whatever jurisdiction it is that they serve in, if it's even required. And we know that that varies from state to state.
Right. So obviously, it takes a little time to get used to a certain vendor. And to make sure that the relationship is going to work out, and we like to call it date before you marry over here. And that's we work with a handful of contractors as well, not process servers obviously, but people in marketing and technology and design. I guess talk to us a little bit about that getting to know one another phase and testing the waters, and maybe even touch on requirements in the way of what you expect from them in the field. What sort of requirements do you lay out to them in the way of attempts and pay and things of that nature?
Yeah, there's a few points in there.
Right.
Yeah, like you said, we do date before marriage, and we always put it out there when we're talking to a new vendor that we're going to start on a trial basis. And again, I mean, it could be a vendor who's only going to see a paper or two in a year, or it could be a vendor who's going to see a decent volume of work from us. But either scenario, that trial period is a good time to get to know each other better and make sure that it is going to be a good fit. We're lucky. I mean, we seldom have had bad luck in that phase, and I credit our open communication beforehand for that success. It's still a necessary phase. You can't ignore it. You have to make sure the fit is there. But Firefly and all of you, you should be willing to pay a little bit more for quality work. Professionalism comes with a price. We recognize that when we pay our own servers and when we look for a vendor. And in our profession, like a lot of others, I think you do get what you pay for. So, talking about fees or price, I mean, don't shop only on price. We get a lot of calls, and usually these are like the pro se clients, and you guys probably do too. All they want to know is how much and how fast. Our phone answerers here have a little pitch ready for them, and it kind of works the same with, talking back and forth with a vendor. There's more to it. So, what are the expectations on both sides? Clients have varying expectations. Vendors need to know up front what those are and be willing to meet the expectations, but at a price point that makes sense for both sides. And these are things that are covered with vendors before the first time we send a job to them. Process servers in some states where 3 or 4 attempts might be normal or routine might find what I'm going to say next ridiculous, but we have some clients who need 8 to 12 attempts before they let us non-serve one of their papers. It's come about over time due to the way judges have been ruling after seeing affidavits of non-service come across the bench way too many times and just sending them back out and sending them back out. It's forced the clients kind of into a box where rather than go to court 3 times and extend a case 4, 5, 6 months, they want 8 to 12 attempts before a non-service affidavit even gets to their office. So the client needs it, I've got to provide it, and sometimes I know that's going to cost me more than a quote-unquote routine service when I find myself a vendor, especially in states where routine is 3 attempts. So expectations need to be clarified even before fees can be discussed. It's not helpful to anybody for me to send a service out and then get a call a week later telling me that, okay, 3 attempts are done, and realize, but this is a client where I need 8 or I need 12, and now I need to pay that vendor a second full fee or even a third full fee to get that required number of attempts. So, as for fee amounts, I'd love to tell everybody, how much should I pay for a vendor for service, but it's really not possible. It depends on the city and state where service is needed. Everybody knows fees across the country vary greatly. I've got vendors in major metro areas that do great work, and they do it for $30 or $40 a paper, and they do quite well for themselves as well because they're doing volume. Now we've got rural vendors, and they can command into the hundreds of dollars, and not just for the serve, but hundreds of dollars for attempt, because the address could be half a state away. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe shame on me, maybe there's somebody closer that I'm not finding, but by the time I've called the guy that's half a state away, it's because I haven't found anybody closer, and more power to him if he's got the area locked up and he can command that money. At the same time, he's paying for gas, it's his travel time. So, again, it's got to be a partnership. I got to understand both sides. And I got to pay for the service I need. So, we'll negotiate, but I show my hand, my cards are on the table, and most of the time I don't know if I'm lucky or I'm kind of glad to be in an industry where most people are pretty forthright with me about what's involved and what their costs are. So we strike a mutual balance. I actually had one. I mean, this is a truly remote service. I actually had to pay the server to rent a boat to go out to a private island to attempt the only house on that island.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, again, it's not all about the fees, and I had to pay for what it cost to rent that boat and his
Right.
time and everything else that went into it. But we struck a fair balance, and that's the best thing I can suggest is you strike a fair balance that allows you to keep both your clients and your vendors happy, and still leaves you with enough at the end of each month to keep your business in the black.
Where was that served?
I don't remember the state. It was nowhere where you would have actually thought. It wasn't an ocean. It wasn't a major lake. It was like some privately owned large lake off of a pretty well-to-do community where the guy's mailbox is at the dock, but his house is out in the water. So, you can't stand by the mailbox and wait for the guy to come boat out to get his mail. He had to put the boat in and go out to the house.
Right, that's a great story. So for those looking, and I imagine there's a handful of people on attending ServeCon that are looking to do more forwarding, what expectations should they set for pay when they're talking to potential vendors or affiliates? Obviously, at some level, no one wants to, but they're probably going to have to carry some receivables. But I can't imagine that we hear it sometimes, you'll get paid when I get paid by my client. Unfortunately, it's not going to be a long-term approach for you if you're taking that stance if you want to do a lot of forwarding. How should payment terms be established and discussed with that potential contractor?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right about you'll get paid when I get paid, and that's something I would never recommend, and something we don't do. It's not going to foster a long-term relationship at all. But yeah, I mean, carrying receivables is a tough one. Nobody likes to do it. Now, we've got a few vendors that we actually always send prepayment to along with the services, simply because those vendors are set up in a model where they demand prepayment. They won't invoice any of their clients, but they're good. We love the work they do. It's worth it to us. We don't mind it. We'll send that prepay out. Now, by no means is that the majority. We'd be floating money like crazy, and nobody can afford to do that, no matter how big or how small. But those guys are out there, and again, you get what you pay for, so sometimes that's worth it. Now, most of our vendors will invoice us. Net 30, I think, is pretty standard in the industry. And the flip side of that is net 30 to our clients is also pretty standard. So overall, on a month-to-month basis, I think it works out pretty evenly. But even so, like I said, we'll never hold that payment hostage based on payment from a client. So even if the vendor hasn't paid us yet, if our client hasn't paid us yet, we're going to pay our vendor. We need to do that just to remain good partners, and no vendor wants to hear that. They did work for us, and they've sent us an invoice, so we'll pay that invoice. And like I said, we do it on net 30 as well. But actually, in real life, and I don't know, we do it, I think, just to make it easier on our finance and accounting staff. We actually pay every 2 weeks. So any receivables that have come in every 14 days are actually going back out. We say net 30 in case it takes us that long, because maybe it'll be 2 pay cycles instead of 1, but we're cutting checks every 2 weeks. So, a vendor that's doing work for us and invoicing us, he'll see his payment, every 2 weeks, and that way our staff isn't overwhelmed at the end of the month either with receivables. Now, fees, like I mentioned earlier, number of attempts is only one part of that initial discussion with a potential new vendor. Other things we discuss and gain mutual understanding of include turnaround time, which anybody that subscribes to any of the boards, you always see it. Price and turnaround time, price and turnaround time. So one thing that we kind of clarify is what turnaround time is to us. Think about it. I mean, how can you guarantee true turnaround time in X number of days when you don't know how many attempts it's going to take before the guy's home or answers his door? So what we educate our clients on is when the first attempt is going to be made, when that service is in the server's hands. So it's not hard and fast, but a nice rule of thumb, because this is what we tell our clients, so this is what we try to pass down to our vendors, is we'd like to see a first attempt within 72 hours. That gives us time to get the documents from our client today, put in our system, and then emailed, ideally, or FedEx if necessary, out to the vendor. And now they've got a day to, put it in their system, get it processed, put it in their server's hands. So, we like to say 72 hours until first attempt. And, that's for routine service. Obviously, for extra fee, there's rush, and we're prepared to invoice our client for that and pay our vendor for that. But, depending how many vendors you've used across the country, you might be surprised by the number of affidavits that might come back incomplete, incorrect, illegible. So, another thing we deal with up front too is an understanding on how important that finished word product is, independent of number of attempts expected for fee paid. So, yeah, I mean, service attempts need to be accomplished expediently. Expedient attempts are appreciated, but, and I think you guys know this, I mean, the most airtight serve in the world doesn't matter without a properly executed, detailed return to file with court. And a lot of times this is needed before a court date, so, there is a deadline that we can't miss. So, a delay in affidavit return time once service is complete does us no good. We like to be proactive. We like to prevent those unpleasant surprises. So we ask our vendors to email or fax us a copy of that completed affidavit before they drop an original in the mail or into FedEx. And that way, it does a couple things. We can see if the document is properly executed and let the client know, that it's on its way and when to expect it. And on the other hand, should we catch an issue, we can let the vendor know right away what needs to be corrected and avoid that delay. And then, another topic I discuss with potential new vendors is, and again, it's not turnaround time and it's not, how many attempts, but it's the actual times that they're going to make attempts. And again, I'd like to think everybody out there in the process serving industry makes attempts at all times of day, evening, weekend, morning. But unfortunately, we do still come across some non-serve affidavits. Lots of attempts, no attempt in the morning, or no attempt in the evening, or no attempt on the weekend. Our clients don't like to see it, and it's because they know from experience it gives a judge a reason to send service back out. So it's going to delay a file, it won't make a client happy. Best advice there is to make sure that any potential new vendor is going to vary their service attempts and show a good solid effort at getting that person served.
So Randy, we have about 10 minutes left, and we're getting some questions that are coming in as well. So I know there's a few topics that we still want to touch on. Maybe we briefly touch on some of the topics we still want to cover, and then we get to a couple questions.
Sure.
I guess talk briefly about the technology requirements that you might have of a vendor or an affiliate.
Sure. We definitely won't tell another company, what technology they have to run a business. We do like to move documents electronically whenever we can. Obviously it's fastest and the most efficient. Best case scenario is we send an emailed PDF or whatever other format the vendor might need. And once that work is received by the vendor, we do have a process server website we can set them up on. They can go in, confirm receipt of the documents, they can enter attempts, and they can close out the jobs in real time or not in real time. Our website actually works both as an app and as a desktop, and it's the same thing on either way. So we've got servers using everything from the smallest smartphone to the laptop to the pad to the in-office computer. and going into our system. We won't force this on any of the out-of-house vendors, although it is a requirement of our own servers that they do everything in real time, because we like to have our attempts entered in real time, because our clients are watching on a client side of the site also, and they can see those attempts. But it's a ever-developing thing, and everybody's kind of at a different stage in their business of where they are technologically. So we won't force it on anybody. We have it available. We'll educate them as much as they need or as little as they need to get them up on our system, if they're willing to do that.
Gotcha. Briefly, compliance. What happens on the other end of the line when you're talking to process servers about compliance? Are there any requirements that get handed down to your vendors from your clients?
The short answer is yes, but not a lot of them. Compliance is huge these days. We've got a compliance policy in place here. We've got a compliance process team that meets regularly to make sure our policies are current. We even went so far to bring in a outside third party, and we underwent about a year ago a SOC 1 audit, and much more recently we just completed and passed a SOC 2 audit. And for those unfamiliar, SOC is actually Service Organization Controls. I think it just, it makes you stronger as a company. It gives an outside set of eyes on something that you've always been doing the way you've always done it, and maybe can point out some things that, can make you stronger as a company. Mm-hmm. But in a nutshell, I think that compliance just ensures that you have necessary controls in place that are relevant to the big three, I think, in the industry: security, privacy, and confidentiality. The only way we really pass it down to the server is with the two agreements that I had mentioned earlier. That's where, if at all we force anything down, it's just in keeping tabs basically on the privacy end of things.
Gotcha. I'll ask you another question that I have, Randy, and then we'll get into a couple questions that the audience has raised. And then I'll give you an opportunity to kind of wrap things up and bring it back around. How do you grade or measure the effectiveness of a particular vendor? Do you have any calculations built into your internal software system?
We do. And realistically, they're rather excessive and over the top. We can tell you all kinds of data, a lot of which in real life, to feet on the ground serving papers, doesn't mean a whole lot. We can tell you your serve versus non-serve rate, right down to time of day, and it's not real life efficient. So we've kind of gone away from it. It exists. We look at it. It helps us kind of compare apples to apples in some scenarios, especially with like in-house servers. Not something we really force hard on vendors. Vendors, we go more the path of just open communication. You guys all like to know how you're doing, and you like to hear, attaboy for good work, and admittedly, we all like to know where we can improve. So, that's really the things we share. You did great with this. You can improve on that, and thanks for doing a great job for us, and keep it up, is the gist of what we really share with vendors. You want average serve time stats, we'll give them to you, and we do have a few pretty high volume vendors that, kind of fight each other for that number one slot, and every quarter want to know how did I rank. In the grand scheme, my top 20 are all doing awesome, so I don't care if you're number 1 or you're number 20. But yeah, we share the data. We touch base, quarterly with the vendors that do, a decent volume of work for us. The firms that maybe only handle 1 or 2 papers, they get real-time feedback. We know they're at the ready. We know they'll do good next time around for us. So the only time that it really gets a little bit uncomfortable, I think, is when a vendor isn't doing as well as expected, or somebody who was once really good begins to kind of falter, or all of a sudden we see, a downward trend in the quality of their work product. So again, communication. We reach out. Hopefully, it's a one-time problem, easily rectified when brought to their attention. Now and then, it's a bigger issue, and we can't help them solve it. But we provide honest feedback, and if necessary, a warning that future work could be impacted if unacceptable performance continues. But I think everybody kind of needs to just aware, realize that if you value your relationships, then you do your very best to get things done and keep things running on track. And now and then we do have to part ways with a vendor, and if necessary, again, it's open, it's honest, and I like to think it's just about always by mutual agreement. We both understand what happened, and we need to part company. And we've had some vendors we've parted ways with who've come back, a year or two later and said, hey, I know what happened back then. I can assure you things are straightened out, and they're back on board with us doing a great job. So, don't burn bridges, if I could give any advice.
I think that's great advice in process serving, any business environment, hopefully any relationship. Definitely great advice. I'm gonna ask you a couple questions from the audience here. We have about 5 minutes left or so, and then maybe there'll be a little time just to kind of wrap things up as well. This question it ties into what you're talking about with statistics, but is more applicable to when you were talking about pay and costs and fees and in that section earlier. But the question is do you use statistical data to calculate metrics such as the average cost per serve?
Actually, yeah. Our finance department provides those numbers every month to our management staff. And I get a look at them. Generally, all I really use them for is to see, it's broken down two ways. It's the most volume and also who's making the most money from us. And almost all the time, you'll see those two things are on par with each other. The guy making the most money is the guy doing the most volume. Or, some reasonable facsimile thereof, but, the number one guy is making the second amount of, the most pay from us that month. The only time that kind of stands out or rings a bell with me is when I've got a server that, maybe is ranked 20th or 30th in volume, making first, second, or third in money. Then I got to look at whether or not I'm overpaying for service. But that goes back to where is he serving, and is it realistic? Sometimes the answer is yes. That's what it costs for that part of the world. Other times I might be getting overcharged, and it's time for a discussion with that vendor. I hate to just say, bye, I found somebody cheaper, especially if he's been on with us for a while, he's doing good work for us, he understands our system. So we'll have a talk. And there's been more times than I can remember over the years where they understand. If I'm not making a profit, it doesn't make sense for me to keep sending them work. So they're willing to work with me. And yeah, occasionally there's times where they can't work with me, and there might be somebody that's a little bit more cost effective, and we'll try them out as well. But the only tough part there is, again, not burning your bridges. You don't want to tell that guy that you think is costing you too much that you're trying someone else, only to find out that you were getting what you're paying for, and now you got to crawl back and say, all right, I'm sorry, I understand now, can you keep serving my papers for me?
Right. One last question from the group here, Randy, and then we'll let you wrap it up. I'm interpreting this question as, when is it a better option to recommend that you go direct to the person in that location versus trying to manage the serve yourself? What would be some indicators?
I've got two good ones, and it comes up regularly here. We do it. The first one is a rush situation where playing the middleman isn't going to accomplish the end goal for the client. He needs a paper served halfway across the country. I've got a vendor there, but it's going to take me time to get him the papers. It's going to take him time to get me the affidavit back. I'm going to mark up his fee and pass it along to the client. It's going to take me time and effort. I'm going to let that little bit of profit go. I'm going to recommend that he just call that vendor directly. There's no point in me just brokering middleman to make a few dollars and slow down what the client needs. And I think people appreciate that. And the other scenario is where I simply won't make any money. We do have some set rates. So let's say you wanted service in Oklahoma, and you called here and my staff quoted you $120. Now when I go to actually process your new service request, I find that it's as rural as can be and it's going to cost me $200. I need to let that one go too and just recommend that, you know, that potential new client, just call that vendor directly and get myself out of the middle. And again, you know, I don't think it paints a bad picture. It kind of reminds me of It's a Wonderful Life when, you know, Santa was sending everybody from Macy's to, what was the other store? Gimbals. You know, I mean, it worked out to be a great marketing ploy for them. But, you know, we don't do it to market, but there's a time where it just makes sense to, you know, just let it go. Let it get out of the middle.
So we have about 2 minutes, Randy. Do you want to give us any parting thoughts?
Other than to say thanks, and I greatly enjoyed it. You know, I'll always make myself available to anybody with questions. Like I mentioned, I'm active in the Illinois Association. I attended the NAPS conference the last couple of years. Actually, this year I think we're going to send one of our state managers to let him get a break from the office. But we don't, you know, we don't have secrets. You know, I've got servers that serve for me, and they serve for a lot of other big name process serving companies. And I don't care. You know, I mean, we're all in this together. It's a profession, much more than a job. At least I hope it's looked at that way by, you know, everybody out there today. And you know, I mean, look at partnering with vendors. You know, I mean, don't turn a client away if, you know, you can help them out by partnering with a vendor, and, you know, make a little bit of something in the meantime and keep everybody happy. Technology is another one. You know, get on board with what's out there. Websites are a big one. You know, we touched on that. Keep things you know, a two-way street. Communication is really important. And I think lastly too, you know, keep in mind, just because you're sending something to a vendor doesn't mean, you know, you're only paying them. We've got a lot of vendors that they'll get a new client who needs service in an area where we're well positioned. So, you know, that work will come back to us as well. Generally, we'll tend to reciprocate where we can on price points. So, you know, if they cut me a deal serving something for me 3 states away, and now they need something served next to my corporate headquarters, you know, I'll do it for a lot less than I might normally quote a cold caller. So, you know, keep that communication open, keep that two-way street going, make it a win-win for both sides.
Awesome. Randy, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge today. I think you did a great job, and say hi to everyone over there at Firefly for us, Keith and Matt and Jennifer. And
they're on the other side of the glass laughing at me.
Oh, uh-oh.
We'll do.
All of them?
Yeah, all of them.
You kept your composure. Great job. So thank you again. This has been phenomenal. I know it was a session that a lot of folks were looking forward to. And if they want to contact you, they can they shoot you an email?
Absolutely. I'll give it to you real quick. Randy.Mucha, it's M-U-C-H-A, at firefly.pro, P-R-O.
Great. All right, Randy, you have a great day, and thank you again.